So when we look at the same thing in this industry pertaining to MDMA and you say it's a generic version, would you say this whole readout with MAPS is even on their radar? Hey everyone, welcome to our latest TDR Psychedelic Exclusive. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Today, I've got a big name guest. Haven't talked to him in a while, but let's bring back in Doug Drysdale, CEO of Cybin, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol CYBN. Good to see you. It's been a while.
It has been a while, Shad. Good to see you guys. Thanks for
Yes,
having me on.
good to see you back. Benjamin A. Smith, lead financial writer. Good to see you, Ben.
Good to be here. Good to see you guys. Doug's back in the chair. It'll be a good conversation coming up, I'm sure.
Doug, I want to get into this stock purchase agreement announcement. But before we get there, I always like to tee things up, just how you're managing, obviously, through the trials and tribulations, to say the least, with this industry right now. But I want to create some positive momentum and positive, upswings for people that are watching this podcast, and a lot of the infrastructure that's building behind the scenes. But how have you been enduring these times? It hasn't been easy for a lot of companies, but for those that obviously raised a lot of money in the early days that have a strategy in play, they're here for the long term. Are you finding that, knowing that you fit that bill and criteria that I just outlined?
Yeah, look, we put our ATM in place last summer,
Yeah.
knowing that things were challenging. Back then, we were out sort of assessing what terms of financing might be. It was expensive, frankly, back then.
Yeah.
And frankly, some of the terms were just brutal. We weren't willing to go down that path of heavy dilution and warrants and various other things. So the ATM has been good. It's been something that's been there and reliable and steady, and we've known we can call on it when we needed it. So that's been kind of a good low cost of capital for us, run ticking away over time. And I guess our use of the ATM had kind of factored into our thinking around the LPC agreement we announced today as well, and that having commitment there is valuable. We don't necessarily need all the capital all at once.
Okay.
But knowing that the capital is there helps the team relax a little bit and focus on execution. And it's always that balance, isn't it, between running the operating company, hitting the milestones month to month, quarter to quarter, and running the public company, which often has nothing to do with operations at all.
Hey, we're a small private media company, and not to your size and scale, but I can relate to that every single day. But those are the times that we're in, right?
Yeah, it's been challenging, and I think it's been a bit demoralizing for folks. Especially
Yeah.
on the science side when they're executing like crazy. We're seeing interesting data. We're seeing things moving along, breaking new ground, and then it's like nobody notices. But I think that's just
Yeah.
kind of the fog we're in, and it's not just psychedelics either. It's across biotech. You've seen a very similar situation in many small cap, micro cap companies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's get into the news that was released earlier this week. You entered into a common share purchase agreement with a company called Lincoln Park Capital Fund LLC. They're based out of Chicago, institutional investor that started back in 1999. That's funded or committed to a fund of over $700 million in public company financing. So explain into detail what this announcement is and what it means for your shareholders.
Lincoln Park has got a great reputation. They've very much focused on healthcare. They've funded many companies in the biotech space, often repeat deals. They're a long-only fund. We've known them for quite a while, and they've been following along our execution, our track record. But like I said, we've been looking to secure capital, have that commitment there, so we can have some confidence in runway. Given where the share price is today, which nobody
Yeah.
likes. Don't necessarily want to take it all at once at this price. And we know we've got a bunch of catalysts coming in the next 6 months. We have efficacy data coming for CYB3, our psilocybin analog. We have PK and safety data coming on 004, our deuterated DMT. We've got a subcutaneous formulation we're working on. We'll talk about that and why that's important. We'll have an IND for that program, moving it from the Netherlands to the US later this year. So lots of things coming in the next 6 months. And we didn't want to go out and raise all that capital in one go today when we think that we'll be creating value.
Made sense. Makes sense. Ben, go ahead. I know you wanted to ask a few questions.
Yeah, Doug. In terms of the agreement today with Lincoln Park on Wednesday, they are obligated as part of the agreement to purchase $30 million US over a 36-month period. Now, because of your funding needs as a drug development company, is it a matter of just like, are they going to purchase the shares at their own timeline, or can you sort of pick up the phone and say, when you need funding and say, now might be a good time, or is it completely at their discretion within that timeline?
It's actually completely at our discretion. So
Okay.
the amount, the timing, the pricing, which much of which is based upon formulas, it's very formulaic, but it's at our discretion. So we pull the trigger when we want to, and we've got, of course, this facility plus the ATM plus cash on our balance sheet. I mean, collectively around $80 million or so that we have access to, and we can pick and choose which tool we use at which point in time.
Sorry, a little bit of delay there, but no worries. I wanted to ask, like, what factors, I guess, influence the decision to enter in this agreement? And like, is this their first psychedelic based investment?
I think it is their first psychedelic-based investment. Yeah, they've been talking to us for quite a while, getting to know the programs.
Okay.
They've done a deep dive. I think every call we've had with them has had 4 PhDs on it, so they've asking all the tough questions. So I think they're taking their time to get comfortable. They know biotech, know drug development very, very well. And for us, we wanted to see a track record too, and they've got a great track record working with other biotech companies. And like I said, often repeat deals over time, helping them get to the finish line.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, drug development isn't cheap, is it? Need that money, especially in this day and age, right?
Yeah, the good news is though we've come a long way very quickly. It took us only about 18 months to get from the bench to the clinic. We've done smart things to accelerate the programs, like we acquired a DMT phase 1 program. We were just reviewing that this last week. I think that acquisition saved us a year and 9 months, which is pretty incredible. When
How
you
did
think
that
about it.
happen? How did that save you that? That's I never knew that.
So what we were able to do with that acquisition is start working on DMT while we were completing the tox package for 004, our deuterated version, which
Right.
we're unable to put into humans until you complete that full package. But being able to study DMT before that was finished gave us a head start. So now we're
Mm,
dosing 004, and we already have about a year of data with DMT that we're just plugging into the program. So it saved us an awful lot of time.
which is huge, right? Huge.
Time is money. Yeah.
Time is money. Go ahead, Ben. I know you want to talk about some of the things regarding their pipeline.
Yeah, now recently, the trial that's been more in focus is your phase 1 clinical trial evaluating intravenous DMT. And there's been a lot of good research lately, most prominently Small Pharma a few months ago with oral DMT, and it produced spectacular results for depression. So I want to see where this particular trial, CYB 004, where is it in the hierarchy of importance in your trial pipeline? And do you think IV DMT could actually be more effective than oral dose DMT in the future?
Okay. So just to clarify, there's no oral dose of DMT. DMT is not orally bioavailable. So Small Pharma is studying DMT using IV. It's an IV infusion pump.
Okay.
And this is a device that enables you to program how much of the drug and fluid goes into a person's veins over time. And we're using a similar device in our DMT study. We started in part A with just using a slow infusion over time. Doesn't really get you there because psychedelic effects are a threshold effect. You have to get across a certain plasma concentration before you're getting those benefits. And DMT is broken down so quickly in the body that the slow infusion just doesn't really get you there. Part B was a bolus plus infusion. So this means pushing more of the drug into the bloodstream faster in a short period of time, maybe over 30 seconds, and then holding the patient in that DMT space using the infusion. You can end up using less drug over time. And with our CYB4 dosing, we're doing the same thing. We're trying to mimic what we've seen with DMT. CYB4 is more potent, right? It's
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
bioavailable, gets into the brain more efficiently. So we're having to match that. So that's the current setup, and that's what we're doing in our study, and that's what Small Pharma has been doing. Our ultimate goal, though, is to move away from those IV infusion pumps. We've seen with ketamine that having to have specialist clinics with IV infusion pumps limits access. You need specialist staffing, specialist training. Psychiatrists and therapists don't have IV infusion pumps in their offices. They barely know how to use a needle. Frankly, these folks don't do that kind of medicine. So what we're developing, because of this characteristics of O4, is a subcutaneous injection. So think of a Wegovy or an Ozempic, the little tiny needles that patients can basically give themselves. That's essentially what we're aiming to deliver, is a small needle, goes into the fat around the belly, most likely that a nurse or a doctor or the patient could give themselves. Then CYB4 could be dosed anywhere, in any doctor's office where there's a bed or a couch, and removing
Right.
all that infrastructure need, which I think is going to be a major challenge with IV infusion.
Is that different than the micro patch that some companies are developing, where you have that little patch with the little micro needles that go right into the skin?
Yeah, the challenge with those patches are good if you want to deliver drug over time. Um, and while we are doing it, delivering over time, we're only talking about a 45 to 60-minute session, whereas patches are generally used for hours or days or weeks of
Hmm.
dosing.
Well, I've had a lot of conversations recently, and there's some promising news about MAPS, their phase 3 readouts, regarding MDMA. Um, Great news as far as the American Medical Association with some of these insurance codes that have recently been approved. But I'd be curious to know, like, I've talked to people on the clinical model side that are focusing on that. You're on the drug development side, but I'd be curious to understand some of the conversations that you're having on how much work needs to be put into place with the overall road of commercialization for a lot of these compounds. Because it's one thing to get approval from the FDA, but the amount of infrastructure, from what I'm learning, this could take years, could it not?
Well, it's not only approval from FDA. In some ways, that's just the first hurdle. After that, you've also got reimbursement, right? So
Right,
adoption, reimbursement, access, a lot of that comes down to the treatment protocol. So how many doses is it, over what time frame, what kind of support does it need? And also, how is it dosed, what infrastructure, special equipment, training is needed, and then what does
right,
it cost? And from the outset, we've approached CYB3 and CYB4 with all of those things in mind. I just talked about CYB4 and how we're trying to remove the need for specialist infrastructure, but also a 45 to 60-minute session. So we're not talking hours and hours in the clinic. With
money,
CYB3, our psilocybin hour, we've also trying to address that as well, by having something that's faster acting and shorter acting. The protocols do matter. It's not just about the molecule, but also how you dose it. Another thing we're doing with CYB3 is giving 2 doses 3 weeks apart, trying to maximize the durability of effect, so patients have to come back less. Fewer visits means better use of the infrastructure as well. So those things are really important. I think there will be a challenge in terms of adoption for MAPS. I think the data is likely to look really good from what we've seen so far. But the protocols are, as you'd expect in PTSD, fairly lengthy.
right.
But I think phenomenal proof of principle for the sector. I think a huge win for the sector once we see that application go in and an approval. And look, just having 2 programs at that stage with MAPS and with Compass Phase 3, I think is really good validation for the sector as a whole.
Now, Doug, I want to
Oh,
ask you. Oh, sorry, there's a little bit of a delay there, but I want to also ask you about the Cybin's Embark Open Access Program, which is basically an online system that offers free of cost a course that offers psychedelic facilitation training to healthcare providers. Now, we've seen some in the space set up their own programs. Numinous has their own Numinous Network program at cost. Now, as a drug developer, I want to ask you, why are you getting into this sort of initiative? Because you're more on the drug development side and not the clinic side.
Okay, so therapist or facilitator training for clinical studies is really important. We want our facilitators to be consistent. The last thing you want is to have the outcome, a patient outcome, affected by the variability between therapists or facilitators. So having a baseline of training is important. As we move to phase 3 studies next year with CYB3, we're going to need maybe 20 sites in the US, maybe a similar number, 15 or 20 in other countries. That's a lot of sites to train and a lot of facilitators
Right.
to train. And we all know that there's a lack of those, a lack of therapists in general, but and even more a lack of those that are experienced with psychedelics. So part of the thinking with putting out the Embark, at least the foundational part of the course, which is 14 videos, making that open access, is that we would encourage therapists to sign up and train themselves. So we have about 500 people signed up so far. It's been
Wow.
just a few weeks. That's potentially 500 folks that we can tap into to become facilitators in our studies, and they trained themselves. We didn't have to pay for that. So it's a database of self-trained folks that we can access, and also at the same time providing a service to the therapist community as well.
So you've had 500 people register within a matter of a couple of weeks. Is that correct?
Yep. Yep.
Goes to show where this, like, healthcare
That's
is
what
about,
happens when you don't charge for it.
right? Like, you can see the healthcare system is going to get turned upside down, but you can see how there's a general interest, but data is key. But you talked about phase 3 next year. We've talked actually a little bit on our podcast in the past, where once the phase 2 data comes out, we could see big pharma really coming in and sponsoring a lot of these phase 3 trials. Do you believe that will happen?
Like, I do think big pharma is watching and paying attention. I think every large pharma company that has a CNS or a psychiatry department has reached out to us, or we've reached out to them at some point. Those conversations are just continuous. I think they're watching and waiting. But like I said, I think it comes down to a number of things, not just the molecule, but the scalability of it, the
Yeah.
treatment protocols, the data, the IP as well. And I definitely think you'll see deals happening, the transactions happening in the space. When is it going to happen? Who can say in this market, honestly, what's what the timing might be? But definitely a
We were
space that pharma can't afford to miss out on.
we were hoping to get the exact day and time here to announce today, Doug. That's what we were aiming for, but guess we'll have to wait and see a little bit longer.
So you have
Anyways,
no
listen, go
do you
ahead,
have any
Ben.
sorry, I had to follow up on that, what you just said there, Doug, and because you know you know a lot of people in this space and you talk to a lot of people, is there any sort of is there any sort of debate in your circles about what that catalyst might be? Is it going to be the FDA approving MDMA assisted therapy? Is it going to be like successful phase 3 trial data from Compass or someone else to really get the ball rolling in terms of catalyst? Or is everybody just mystified? Is it going to be a critical mass sort of event which triggers everything and triggers investor interest in the space? If you had to guess one of those things, what would you say it's going to be to really get this sector moving?
I think it's the right molecule with the right protocol and IP that is scalable. So I think when we talk to pharma, and with all respect to what MAPS and Compass are doing, I think they've done tremendous work that we're all benefiting from. They largely see those programs as generic.
Hmm,
I think that the MAPS protocol in the hands of big pharma may have been approached differently. And the pharma has a huge focus on IP, given all the challenges with getting a return on drug development these days. Compass has IP. I don't know whether that will stand up after the initial period of exclusivity, but any doubts like that are going to send pharma uh, uh, make them worried and make them concerned. And they also question the commercial viability of treatments that take 6, 8 more hours
interesting.
of clinical supervision. So I think once you have a molecule that is shorter, rapid, shown to be safe, shown to be effective, has IP, can be scalable, has a better chance of being reimbursed, then why wouldn't they be interested in that? And I think in large part they see the maps and the Compass programs as proof of concept. Yeah, if they can get approved,
Mhm,
then so can Gen 2, if you want to call it that.
right. We had a Twitter space a couple weeks ago speaking to an executive from a cannabis company and one of the biggest cannabis lobbyists in Washington. And there's this been conspiracy within the industry of whether or not Big Pharma wants cannabis to be legalized. And the response that we got was that they don't even know what's going on. It's not on their radar. It's not even really of a concern. They don't care. So when we look at the same thing in this industry pertaining to MDMA and you say it's a generic version, Would you say this whole readout with MAPS is even on their radar?
Oh no, I think they're watching it.
Yeah.
When we speak to groups, business development groups in those companies, they are really well informed. They know the science behind it. They know the IP. They know the history. They know all the major companies. They know which questions to ask. So these companies know how to develop drugs. They know how to license drugs. So they're definitely following what's going on for
Okay.
sure.
All right. Well, listen, appreciate the update. Look forward. Are you going to be in Denver next month for the MAPS conference?
I was planning to be there. I was going to be speaking, but unfortunately, I have a conflict now, so I won't be there. But have a great time. Have one for me,
All
and
right.
see
Hoping we
you.
could
See you next time around.
see you and get maybe a bone-in ribeye with us in Colorado. They got good steaks in Colorado. I think they would, wouldn't they, Ben? They got to have good steaks in
I think
Colorado.
so. I've never been there, but I'm sure there's
Neither.
going to be a good bonfire and some microdosing sessions somewhere around there
You
if you
think?
look hard enough.
I will not be part of that, but yes, I'm sure that will happen. Nature and psychedelics at its finest within the state of Colorado. But Doug, appreciate the time. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
All
All the
right, take
best.
care.
Thanks, Doug.
See you.
So what'd you all think of the interview? Did you like what we recorded with our guests? Then leave a comment below and let us know what you thought of it. And if there's any more questions you want us to ask, as usual, share this video with your network, click on that bell for all notifications, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.